Hello, and welcome to the Kitty Cat Lane. My name is Lane, and today I want to talk about why you should be learning how to draw chibi and stylized cartoon characters. Every so often, I'll go on a chibi kick where I'll just draw everything in a cute and simplified version of my style. I get to be really loose and relaxed with my art. It's usually after I've gotten really focused on trying to make my art overly anatomically correct or semi-realistic, and in turn, I lose a bit of my style by being too strict on what I should and shouldn't do. When that happens, I feel like my art looks too stiff and kind of uncanny. That's when I know it's time to do something different and refreshing. So the cool thing about stylization is that you don't always have to be so anatomically correct, so long as you can translate the general idea of what you're going for in your art. After all, we already know that the art is not supposed to be realistic if the head of your character is the same size as the body. So why not have fun with it, and push the boundaries of what this made-up anatomy can do? Make them more exaggerated and goofy. The chibi art style is very broad, so there's many ways you can interpret your art style into this style. Chibi literally means short or small in Japanese, and typically the style has large heads with exaggerated features while having smaller and simplified bodies. It's usually very cute and round and makes the character look kind of childlike, but it doesn't have to be that way. When stylizing your character, you can choose what parts you think are more important to emphasize or simplify. You're basically learning to reinterpret your own style, but stripped down to something that you can more easily and quickly draw. You can just doodle away without so much pressure of it being just right. So it's great for drawing comics or storyboarding. You know, jotting down the blueprints, the ideas of what you want to draw, without spending so much time on each panel. Why do you think so many animated shows and comics are so stylized? There's more than one answer to this question, of course, but a big reason is because the more complex the character or art style is, the harder it is to quickly and consistently replicate it over and over again in motion and/or from all angles. Basically, if you're able to successfully demonstrate poses, expressions, and gestures with a simplified character, then why would you make it more complicated with unnecessary clutter that just takes more time to draw and animate? But whether you're trying to go into an industry where you'll have to do these things, or just doing stuff for your own self, I still think it's important to learn how to stylize things. If you struggle with anatomy and drawing poses, of course, we all know it would benefit us to study anatomy to better understand it. But that's really daunting. So while you're working on the anatomy at your own pace, you can also work on drawing more confidently by simplifying your technique. Once you're comfortable drawing your simplified shorthand drawings, you'll be able to more confidently draw the more complicated drawings that you might be striving for. Or you might find out that you really like drawing in a chibi or simplified style and want to further develop your new look with your newly discovered techniques. That doesn't mean you have to abandon your more complicated style. A lot of people have more than one style that they'd like to draw in. Like I was saying earlier, it's important to kind of refresh your brain. Once you've driven yourself into a corner trying to perfect one style, sometimes you just need to step away, because you're only going to make yourself more frustrated once you get to a point where you're not seeing improvement. So why not step away and work on something else? That way, when you are ready to go back to your more complicated style, you'll be able to look at it with fresh eyes and be able to see, oh, okay, this is the thing that I was getting frustrated with, and this is why it looks that way. That's why a lot of people, myself included, do the canvas flipping thing. Or if you're a traditional artist, you can just hold your canvas up to a mirror or something reflective so you can see your art from a different perspective. Because once you've been working on the same piece for a couple hours and you've seen it only one way, sometimes you don't notice the imperfections that you would otherwise notice if you leave the room, come back later, and then go, oh, wow, I wish I had noticed that. Of course, if you overly flip your canvas back and forth, then you're going to be used to both ways and you'll not really have a fresh view, you'll just have an idea of what it looks like from both angles. So, you know, it's one of those things, double-edged sword, use it when you have to, but don't overly rely on it or else you'll come to a point where it's no longer useful. Or, like I said, just walk away for a bit and then come back later. Anyway, now that I've made my case, I'm going to talk through some of my demonstrations and examples. Although I'm doing really rough and simple sketches, I'm able to quickly plot out some poses and interactions between characters without looking up a reference. I'm trying to use clear body language and expressions to get my point across with as little detail as possible. I kinda spent more time on the first one than I wanted to, but I loosened up as I drew more. Of course, they would be more accurate if I did look up a reference, but that kind of defeats the purpose of the exercise. We're trying to quickly get the idea across without spending more time than we have to. This could also be considered a thumbnail drawing, where you just draw a couple quick blueprints of what the piece might look like for the finished product, but you're just drawing a generalization of what you want it to look like before you do the real thing. This way you can kind of test out some things, see what you like, and have a better idea of what you're going to draw before you go in for the real deal. Let's say you kind of already have an idea in your head of what you want the pose to look like. You're not exactly sure, but you have a rough idea. So you can roughly sketch it out quickly, and if it's not quite what you're looking for, do it a couple times until you have one that looks the closest to what you want it to look like. Then you can look up some references to try and perfect it a little more. The point wasn't to make the perfect, most accurate sketch, it was just to get a general pose down that expressed the emotion or vibe that I was trying to go for with the two characters. After I had scribbled out some rough sketches of what I wanted the poses to look like, I went over top of it with a new sketch to clean it up, making the anatomy and poses a little more clear. They aren't perfect, but they would be a good base for a more refined drawing. I'm confident enough in my own abilities that I can get the idea across without it being just right. So a quick tip for drawing bodies is to think of them like a pillow or flour sack, especially for soft and cute little simple drawings. You're basically combining the torso or rib section of the body and hips into a blob that can be easily reimagined and drawn in different poses. Just connect the limbs to the corners and the head to the top. It's the way I started my first two demonstration characters here. You don't have to use this tip. In fact, usually I'll draw the vague shape of the ribs and the vague shape of the hips to get my general poses down, but if I'm drawing a blobby little character, I might as well draw a blobby little base. This flour sack pillow method is also kind of a callback to a lot of animation basics where they'll have you animate a flour sack. After you've learned how to animate a ball bouncing, one of the next steps is to animate a flour sack. If you're able to successfully animate a flour sack and give it a personality, then you should be able to animate a person and give them personality. So basically, if you can draw a flour sack in a pose, then you should be able to pose a person. That's how I look at it anyway. Anyway, I was going to leave those sketches as is, but I convinced myself to turn one of them into an actual finished piece. I may be using it as the main background speed paint for this video since my computer crashed during the recording of my chibi and cartoon lane drawing, so I'll keep the recap brief. I narrowed my thoughts down to the first two pairs of the characters, and the two that were confrontational were really speaking to me. I don't practice drawing profile or side view drawings of the face as much, so I was setting myself up for something more challenging. And because of that, I decided to use a scratchy pen-like brush for a rougher look. Something that I knew I wouldn't be able to obsess over the perfect details with. I adjusted the sketch to change the height of one of the characters to better fit my characters that I would be drawing, but I ended up having to resize the heads again later because they were still too big and cartoon looking, at least for the more realistic proportions that I was going for in the finished piece. So resizing that was something that I could have done better before I jumped into the drawing, but it all worked out fine in the end. Once I was all done with the line art, I added shading with the pen in a separate layer, and I liked it, but I ended up making a colored version too. I cropped and did a little more for the colored one just to make it a little more dramatic. But if you're wanting to keep the stylized cartoony look or refine your chibi style, try drawing a character a few times, progressively getting more cartoony or cute and exaggerated with each new rendition. Use different proportions or styles to create a look that suits you and your style. Once you've found a combination or formula that you like, draw other characters or things in that style. I think it's so fun to draw like this, and I hope you'll give it a try and have fun too. Thank you all so very much for taking a walk down the kitty cat lane with me. I hope you all have a wonderful rest of your day, and here's the secret kitty of the day. Bye!